They always said I didn't fit the brand, whatever that meant. At my father's 60th birthday, I showed up in a plain navy dress, flats, and a ponytail. The kind of outfit that said I'm here for the cake, not I run a multi-billion-dollar company. Which, funny enough, I did. But at the time to them I was just Miranda, the weird one. The underachiever. The girl who never got her nails done or bragged about handbags at brunch. Heather, my older sister, greeted me with the usual tight-lipped smile. "Oh," she said, eyeing me head to toe. "You didn't have time to change?" I smiled right back. "This is me changed." She scoffed, already looking past me for someone more worthy of her time, probably someone wearing heels that cost as much as my monthly rent back in college. Father didn't even glance up from his glass of scotch. "Mother?" She gave me a once-over and offered a brief, "At least you're punctual." That party was everything I hated about my family, polished, performative, and profoundly shallow. But I was there for a reason. And it wasn't the shrimp tower. See, what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 weeks earlier I had become the legal majority owner of my father's struggling company. Through a quiet acquisition by my firm, Neurosync Technologies, his legacy had been saved from bankruptcy. He just didn't know I was the one who held the pen. For 13 years I'd let them believe I was ordinary. I'd let them mock my work, my clothes, my life. All while building something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. But tonight would be the last time they ever looked down on me. I just had to let the scene play out until the moment came to flip the script. You ever been in a room full of people who claim to love you but act like you're a charity case they forgot to donate to? That was every holiday, every family dinner, every forced champagne toast at a fundraiser I never wanted to attend. Ever since Dad's business took off in the late 90s, the Haze family turned into a luxury showroom with opinions. Appearances weren't just valued, they were worshipped. My sister Heather led the congregation. She married a hedge fund manager before her 30th birthday and never let anyone forget it. Her Instagram looked like a Vogue cover wrapped in a trust fund. Just a little family getaway, she'd caption a yacht trip to Santorini. Meanwhile, I was debugging neural interface code in a hoodie that still had coffee stains from grad school. Mom played it more subtle, weaponized disappointment wrapped in pearls. "I just wish you'd let yourself shine more," she'd say. Translation? Why can't you pretend to be rich even if you are? They always saw me as the one who didn't play along. I didn't dress right, didn't talk right, didn't network like I was selling stock in my own smile. And the kicker? I never corrected them. Because while they were perfecting their curated personas, I was building something real. Neurosync started in a dusty apartment with bad Wi-Fi and a borrowed coffee maker. I built tech that changed lives. Tools that let stroke patients move again, that helped veterans manage trauma, that gave nonverbal kids a voice. But at the family table? That wasn't impressive. Not unless it came with a designer label. I let them think I was modest out of necessity, not choice. And they never once asked what I did. Not really. Because they'd already decided I wasn't worth knowing. But they were about to learn. And it was going to sting. I don't think anyone ever means to erase you. Not at first. It starts small, a laugh too loud when you speak, an interruption that cuts you off mid-thought. At first, you shrug it off. Later, you stop speaking altogether. That was me at family dinners. Background noise with a pulse. Heather talked about new construction on their third home. Mom asked about the latest bag trends in Milan like she was moderating a panel at Vogue. And Dad? He just nursed his scotch and made pronouncements like a Roman senator. No one asked how I was. No one cared that I'd flown in from a conference in Singapore the night before. My keynote had been live-streamed to 500,000 viewers. At that table, though, I was still just Miranda, the one who never quite figured it out. Funny thing was, I didn't need their approval. Not anymore. I had my own team, my own boardroom, my own building with my name etched into the patent filings. And yet, sitting there in that over-decorated dining room surrounded by polished cutlery and under-polished egos, a part of me still felt 12. Still trying to earn a seat at a table that had already decided who mattered. That's the thing, no one tells you success doesn't always fix the old wounds. Sometimes it just shines a brighter light on them. And while I nodded through another of Heather's rants about poor people not trying hard enough, all I could think about was how rich she'd feel if she knew who signed her husband's company's new software licensing contract last quarter. Spoiler, it was me. I was done being invisible. But not by yelling. Not by demanding to be seen. No, I had something better. Truth. And the truth was about to walk into that house in a tailored suit and call me Madam Chairman. But not just yet. I wanted them to have one last night of certainty. Before everything changed. My father's company, Haze Industrial Solutions, was once the crown jewel of the family. He built it from scratch. Blueprints, steel, sweater, real work. Before the suits and cigars, there were nights he'd fall asleep at the kitchen table with grease on his hands and half-solved logistics charts under his head. I remember those nights vividly, back when we were all still human. Then came the expansion, the contracts, the awards. Suddenly, dinners were replaced with galas, and the man who once taught me how to fix a motor with duct tape became someone who measured your worth by the price of your watch. By the time I was 22, Haze Industrial was struggling. The market shifted, automation crept in, and Dad refused to. But he never saw me as part of the solution. Even with a computer science degree, he still saw soft skills when he looked at me. Said I was too quiet, too theoretical. What he meant was not enough like him. He didn't know that while his company hemorrhaged cash, I was busy building one that didn't. Neurosync Technologies started as a passion project, a way to apply brain-machine interfacing to real-world solutions. By year 4, we were already on the radar of every major tech fund in the valley. And by year 6, we were turning down partnerships. We didn't need their money, but Haze Industrial did. The irony? My team brought the acquisition to me. I didn't even recognize the name at first. Just another failing company in need of a lifeline. But when I saw the CEO listed as Lawrence Haze, I had to laugh. Out loud. In front of my board. I made one call. I want this one, I said. Personally. We bought the company in layers, quiet, strategic. Through subsidiaries. No one connected the dots. Especially not my family. To them, I was still the failure in flats. The girl who didn't belong in the business world. And yet, I was the only reason their business still had a heartbeat. I didn't save the company out of pity. I saved it because I earned the right to. And now, I was ready to collect. 3 weeks before the party, I sat in a mirrored boardroom 12 floors above a street my father used to park on for free. He wasn't there. But every executive he trusted was. They didn't know the new ownership's face. Not yet. To them, I was just the tech rep overseeing the digital systems transition, a quiet liaison sent by the anonymous parent firm that now owned the company. I had asked my legal team to keep my name off every memo until we finalized the structural changes. I watched these men, most of whom had dismissed me at dinner tables growing up, squirm over budgets I now controlled. One leaned over and whispered to another, "Tech's bleeding us." This is what happens when you let outsiders run the show. Outsiders? They had no idea. I kept my questions surgical. Nothing dramatic. Where are the inefficiencies you're most unwilling to address? I asked. And where is legacy pride costing us profitability? The CFO blinked. Excuse me. I repeated the question slower. Sharper. The thing about being underestimated your whole life is you get very good at watching. And even better at waiting. After the meeting, my assistant slipped a note into my hand as we walked out. Investor arrival confirmed. Wants to meet on-site same day as Lawrence Haze's 60th birthday. I raised an eyebrow. He wants to attend the party? He asked if he should bring a gift. I smiled. Oh, he'll be bringing something all right. That's when the plan clicked into place. We'd attend the birthday. They'd humiliate me. Again. Because they couldn't help themselves. And then when the timing was right, I'd introduce our guest. An investor. And the only man in the room who called me Madam Chairman. The night before the party, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror in a rented guest house 20 minutes from the estate I grew up in. The place they now referred to as the Old Money Home. I looked at the dress I had picked. Simple. Sleek. Dark navy again, same one they mocked last year, in fact. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a test. I wanted them to see what they wanted to see, the outsider. The disappointment. The girl who didn't get the memo. Because only then would the reveal actually mean something. I could have worn a designer gown. I had access to more stylists than Heather's favorite influencer. But that's not how you dismantle illusions. You don't walk in changed. You let them believe nothing's changed. And then you show them everything has. The investor, Dominic Varela, had arrived earlier that day, flown in from Sao Paulo. Smart man. Brilliant, actually. Ran a successful AI firm in Brazil that integrated with our neural tech platform. He owed me nothing except maybe the 12-point increase in his market cap after our partnership. He called me from the hotel. You sure you want me to call you that? In front of everyone? Absolutely, I said. Even your father? Especially my father. He paused. Then I'll bring my best Portuguese manners. When we hung up, I stared out the window and thought about how quiet my phone had been. No calls from Heather. No check-ins from Mom. Not even a confirmation text from Dad's assistant. It never occurred to any of them to ask if I was coming. They expected me to show up late. Awkward. Forgettable. They had no idea that tomorrow everything would belong to me, the contract, the company, even the guest list. But I wouldn't need to say a word. All I'd need was one introduction. The driveway was lined with black cars and white lies. You know the type, guests who don't remember your name but remember your net worth. Everyone was dressed like wealth had a dress code, and somehow I was still the sore thumb. As I stepped onto the marble entrance, a valet gave me the same look you give someone who wandered in from the service door. Inside, the place hadn't changed. Still all chandeliers and curated nostalgia. Still smelled like Dad's cologne and Mom's controlled anxiety. A string quartet played something dramatic near the staircase, and Heather was already at the top of it, camera ready, champagne in hand, fake laughing at someone else's joke. I smiled politely. No one looked twice. The plan was working. I found my way to the gift table and placed a small box with no card on it. Just a key inside. Not symbolic. Literal. But they wouldn't understand that until later. Miranda. I turned. Mom. Flawless as ever. Hair in place, lips tight. You came, she said, like it was mildly inconvenient but socially necessary. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, adjusting my sleeve. She glanced at my outfit. Still allergic to fabric over $1,000, I see. I didn't flinch. Still allergic to kindness, I see. She blinked, taken aback, not by what I said, but by the fact I said it. Before she could reply, Heather appeared, right on cue. She walked straight past me, gave Mom a double cheek kiss, and muttered, "I thought you weren't coming," in my direction. I get that a lot, I replied. Especially from people I already RSVP'd to. I headed toward the garden, air was thinner, and so was the pretense. I checked my watch. Varela was due in 12 minutes. That was when Lawrence Haze himself made his entrance. He walked in like he still owned something. And in a few minutes, he'd learn he didn't. If power had a sound, it was the silence that fell when Dominic Varela stepped onto the patio. He wasn't flashy. No entourage. Just a tailored suit, quiet shoes, and the kind of presence that made hedge fund managers straighten their backs. A few people recognized him, or at least recognized that they should recognize him. Heather's husband whispered something into her ear. She immediately stood taller. Dad turned, cocktail in hand, and walked over with the confidence of a man who still thought he owned the room. "Dominic," he said warmly, offering a hand. "Wasn't expecting you here tonight. Didn't realize we shared mutual friends." Varela smiled. "I'm here for your daughter." Dad paused. "Heather." Varela laughed. "No, sir. Miranda." You could hear a wine glass hit the floor somewhere behind us. He turned to me slowly, deliberately, and extended his hand. "Madam Chairman," he said with a slight bow, the kind reserved for royalty or billionaires. I took his hand. Heather blinked, trying to process the sentence. "Chairman of what?" "Of Haze Industrial," he said matter-of-factly. "Miranda's firm closed the acquisition weeks ago. I'm here as one of her investors." Heather's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Mom was pale, like she'd seen a ghost in sweatshop fabric. "Dad?" He just stared at me. The same way he looked at tech he didn't understand, like if he squinted hard enough, it might still disappear. "No," he said finally, voice low. "That's not possible." I tilted my head. "It's already done. All legal. Your board signed off." Quietly, of course. "You didn't read the name on the final document, did you?" He said nothing. I leaned in. "Should have paid attention, Dad. It wasn't just a rescue package. It was a transfer of power. And just like that, I wasn't the daughter who didn't belong. I was the woman who signed his checks. You ever seen a room full of powerful people try to pretend they didn't just lose control? It's fascinating. First comes the stunned silence. Then the rewiring, eyes darting around, recalibrating status. Then the excuses. Wait, Heather said, raising her hands like she was conducting damage control. "You're saying your company bought Dad's?" "No," I replied calmly, turning to face her. "I'm saying I bought it." I could see the wheels turning. Heather, always fluent in inheritance math, suddenly looked like a hedge fund manager who just realized they backed the wrong horse. Across the room, Dad set his drink down like it was suddenly too heavy. "You mean this whole time you were running that tech thing?" "Neurosync. That tech thing employs 6,000 people in 12 countries, I said, folding my hands. And owns controlling interest in 4 mid-tier industrial firms. Haze Industrial just became the 5th. Mom cleared her throat. "Why didn't you tell us?" The way she said it like she was the victim nearly made me laugh. "But I didn't." "Because you weren't listening," I said. "You never were." Dominic stood beside me, letting the moment breathe. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I watched Dad try to piece it together like someone dropped him into a boardroom meeting halfway through and he forgot his reading glasses. "You should have come to me if you wanted to help," he finally muttered. I held his gaze. I did. Once. You told me to stop playing with toys and get a real job. He looked away. I stopped waiting for your permission after that, I added. That's when it hit him. Not the money. Not the acquisition. The fact that his daughter, the one he thought was an embarrassment, had quietly outgrown everything he ever built. And no one even noticed. They say nothing's colder than a father's silence. But they're wrong. It's colder when that silence finally breaks and the only thing behind it is regret that came too late. After the patio cleared and the buzz died down, Dad asked to speak to me privately. No crowd. No cameras. Just two people in a study full of awards with expiration dates. He closed the door behind us, poured a drink he didn't offer me, sat down, then looked up like he didn't quite know where to start. I don't know who you are anymore, he said finally. I know, I replied. He swirled the glass, buying time. I spent my life building that company. I know that too. He sighed. It was mine. No, Dad. It was yours, I said, leaning forward. Now it's surviving. Because I stepped in before it flatlined. He didn't argue. Just stared at the bottle in his hand like he wished it could explain what I'd become. I didn't do this to embarrass you, I said, softer now. I did it because you taught me not to let things break when I could fix them. His eyes flicked up. You think I didn't hear you all those years? About loyalty, about grit. I shook my head. I just applied those lessons to something you didn't understand. He sat back, the tension in his jaw finally releasing. Why didn't you ever tell me? I hesitated. Because you only ever saw what you wanted to see. For the first time in decades, he looked at me, really looked. Not as a disappointment. Not as the odd daughter. As the one who had quietly become exactly what he always claimed to respect. And then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he said the thing I hadn't heard since I was 12. I'm sorry. That was all. But it was enough to crack something open. I found her in the garden exactly where I expected. Mom always fled to flowers when the room got too honest. She said it was centering. I always suspected it was her way of escaping accountability with grace and good lighting. She was clipping roses with hands that had never once touched soil. When she saw me approach, she didn't flinch. Didn't smile either. You planned this, she said quietly. Not a question. A verdict. I did. She snipped another bloom. The outfit. The entrance. The guest. All of it was performance. No, I said. It was clarity. She turned finally. You embarrassed us. No, Mom, I replied, arms folded. I told the truth. You just didn't like the cast. Her expression cracked, not much, but enough for me to see it. That little flash of fear behind the pride. Do you think it's easy for a mother to watch her child reject everything she was raised to value? Mom, you didn't raise me to value anything. You raised me to perform, I said, my voice low but sharp. Smile for guests. Dress for status. Measure self-worth by price tags. She exhaled, long and slow. We just wanted you to be protected. No. You wanted me to be palatable. A pause. Then she looked down at the rose in her hand. You always were difficult to categorize. I stepped closer. Because I didn't want to be categorized. I wanted to be respected. Another silence stretched between us. You know, she said finally, I wasn't born into money either. When I married your father, I learned fast. Pretending was survival. That surprised me. I'd never heard her speak of life before marble countertops. But the difference between you and me, Miranda, she added, is that you stopped pretending. And somehow you survived anyway. There it was. The closest thing to admiration she could offer. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something honest. Heather found me by the bar. Of course she did. It was the only place she ever felt in control, a stemmed glass in one hand, a perfectly rehearsed insult in the other. But this time her confidence looked cracked around the edges. Like someone who just realized she might not be the main character in her own story. Miranda, she started, her tone overly casual, like we were swapping gossip instead of dismantling a decade of resentment. That was a lot. Accurate, I corrected, sipping water. She leaned in, fake smile in full force. So this Neurosync thing, you really run it? I nodded. CEO. Founder. Chairwoman. All the job titles no one at this party ever asked me about. She laughed short and sharp. Wow. You really played the long game, huh? I met her eyes. I wasn't playing. I was building. You just didn't notice. Heather bristled. That's not fair. We're family. We've supported you. No, I said flatly. You tolerated me. There's a difference. The words hung in the air between us, sharp enough to slice through the curated playlist humming in the background. She looked away, jaw tense. You know, Mom and Dad always worried about you. Said you'd never fit in. They were right, I said. I didn't fit into their version of success. So I built my own. She fell quiet. For the first time in maybe 20 years, she didn't have a clever retort. Finally, she muttered, so what now? You own the company, you proved your point. Do you expect us to bow down? I shook my head. No. I expect you to think twice the next time you judge someone by their shoes. Heather scoffed, but it didn't have teeth anymore. Her armor was slipping. Fast. And then she said something I didn't see coming. I'm thinking of starting something. On my own. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She nodded, eyes flicking down. Sustainable interior design. Clean materials. Ethical sourcing. No logos. For once, I didn't say anything. Because for once, she was being real. Maybe, just maybe, the walls were starting to come down. It started with an invitation from Dad. Handwritten. No assistant. No stiff wording. Just, Sunday, 6 p.m. Bring whatever you like. Dad. I stared at it for a long time before texting back. You cooking, or is this another catered lecture? His reply came fast. I'll cook. It might kill us. You've been warned. So I went. And so did Heather. And Mom. No pearls, no curated critique. She wore flats. That alone could have made headlines. We had lasagna homemade. Sauce was uneven, noodles overcooked, but Dad insisted he followed the recipe emotionally. We laughed. Like actual laughter. Not the kind that follows a forced toast or awkward silence. Heather told us about her sustainable design idea. Not a pitch, a vision. She'd been meeting with nonprofits, learning supply chains, actually listening to people who didn't summer in Tuscany. She was different. Not unrecognizable. Just lighter. Mom even joked about selling her handbag collection. We all looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Relax, she said, waving us off. I said joked. Dad didn't talk about quarterly numbers. He asked questions instead. Like a man who finally understood that commanding a room wasn't the same as connecting with one. No big speeches. No confessionals. Just dinner. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't proving anything. I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the surprise. I wasn't even the tech one. I was Miranda. Sister. Daughter. Woman who wore simple shoes and still owned the building. And they were seeing me. Finally. Not because I demanded it, but because I stopped asking for permission to matter. There was a time I would have given anything to hear my mother say the words, I'm proud of you. Yeah? I just needed to hear them mean it. And maybe she finally did. We were clearing plates after another low-key dinner, yes, they'd become regular now, and Mom caught me alone in the kitchen. No makeup armor, no cryptic comments. Just her, holding a dish towel like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands. You know, she said slowly, I used to tell myself that your strength came from rebellion. I turned. And now? She smiled, a little sad. Now I think it came from clarity. I didn't respond. Just dried the plate in my hand and waited. I was afraid, she admitted. Of you failing. Of being judged. Of being left behind. I looked up. That part surprised me. You've always been braver than me, she said. And I didn't know what to do with that. There it was, not a full apology, but something deeper. A confession. And it was enough. Later that night, Dad asked if I'd sit in on an upcoming board meeting, not as a formality, but as part of the team. I know you're technically my boss, he said with a crooked grin. But I'd still like your opinion. I trust your judgment. That might have meant more than any, I'm sorry. Heather and I even had coffee last week, her idea, not mine. She showed me mood boards for her new business. Talked about sourcing hemp-based textiles and partnering with local artisans. I nodded through most of it, impressed. I don't expect you to invest, she said quickly. I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't going to offer. She laughed. That's fair. We were getting there. Not friends, but sisters. Something we hadn't been in decades. And me? I'd finally stopped waiting for applause in a house that used to ignore me. Now, I wasn't performing. I was just being. And that was everything. It's funny how quiet the world gets when you stop chasing approval. 3 months after the party, I walked through the glass lobby of Haze Industrial's headquarters, the same building I wasn't welcome in 2 years ago. This time, the receptionist stood when she saw me. She didn't ask my name. She didn't ask for an appointment. Good morning, Miss Haze, she said. I smiled. Just Miranda. The staff knew now. The board knew. Even the suppliers knew. The woman in flats was no longer an embarrassment. She was the boss. But that wasn't the point. I didn't do it for revenge. I didn't do it to show them. I did it because I could, because I believed in what the company could be if it stopped pretending to be untouchable. We restructured quietly. Introduced new systems, trimmed bloated departments, shifted focus to adaptive technologies and ethical sourcing. The old guard resisted, sure. But Dad, to his credit, adapted. Slowly, carefully, like someone rebuilding not just a company but a legacy. The man who once mocked my hoodie now asks for my feedback on strategy. The mother who used to flinch at my flats now walks beside me in sneakers. And Heather? She sends me photos of fabric swatches. The house is different now. Dinners are simpler. Phones stay in pockets. Conversations aren't about who wore what but who we're becoming. And me? I don't need the stage anymore. I already won. Not because I have the title. Not because I have the money. But because I walked back into the room they kicked me out of. And they didn't even realize it was my room. They rejected me for the simple clothes, not knowing I held their future in my hands. And I still do.